Oscura Lost Light is in this weird dimension of good and bad. The art style and presentation do the game wonders to have you enjoy its world, but the game shows a lack of polish around its edges and has some questionable design decisions underneath its surface. There's a bunch of good elements here though regardless, but does the darkness hold something lurking underneath? Let's find out. Keep in mind that the game releases on February 24th. For disclosure purposes, this first impressions was done by a key obtained from the developer. The first impressions are done approximately 4 hours plus of gameplay. Let's start with one of the strengths the game has going for it, its looks. While still having that black aesthetic from games like Limbo, the choice of color usage is very well done in a minimalistic fashion, and yet makes sure that the key elements are highlighted for the user to see. Enemies are given just enough color to make them blend into the environment in certain situations, but not enough where you're completely drawn to them. There's really a lot of smart art decisions here in terms of the drawing and coloring, which helps it stand out from even a game like Limbo. Animations can be clunky at times though. It's not that the animation is bad, but a little bit of a different problem that I'll allude to later. It could have used a couple of different death animations though, as location and getting hit doesn't seem to make a difference, which really could have sold the deaths and made you feel them. But the game starts to show some signs of weakness at its gameplay, despite some solid concepts and some reasonable execution in several aspects. The basic gameplay elements involve basic platforming and the manipulation of things in the environment. You're unable to defeat any enemies that you come across yourself. The only way to deal with them is to avoid them altogether or use the environment's hazards to beat them. You have a double jump that controls reasonably well, and the controls do the platformer justice as you never feel like the game is fighting you in that regard, at least that you didn't cause. Now I want to be very specific saying the controls are good. The environment interaction however is a different story, which I will allude to later. Your powers are determined by the level in question, as at any time you can have 2 of them. The powers vary from the ability to manipulate gravity so it goes in the opposite direction, the ability to cause platforms to appear, or to destroy certain platforms or hazards. The game introduces all of them rather early, and does mix them up a reasonable bit, which helps it not feel boring at times. On the surface the game does provide a challenge, and does a good job in providing entertainment, at first. Part of where it suffers is level design. You'll start to notice trends on the level design in later levels, and while yes, the levels are most definitely different, you'll feel like you're facing the same basic challenge at times, which was weird. They definitely mixed it up, but I found myself feeling like I was doing the same thing over and over again, which made me suffer because of it. Now, learning how to use powers can really improve your progress at the game. The gravity power in particular, when mastered, provides a fast way to get around the environment, as you gain speed and use it to throw yourself through the environment effectively. One note to make is that your power only recharges in terms of usage when you're on the ground, which they don't exactly teach you, but is taught after you die a couple of times wondering why you couldn't use a power. Using powers effectively can really help you through the level and gives you the sense of accomplishment. But like I alluded to earlier, the platforming has flaws. Collision detection has its odd moments, where it seems like the hitbox was extended further than the visuals showed, which in a game where precision can be key, really led to some frustrating moments. In one particular case, I ended up jumping on a blocked off laser producer only to find that I had died from, well, lasers due to the sound cue. While it didn't repeatedly come up in normal gameplay, when it did, I sat there scratching my head because it happened often enough for me to notice, and when testing it out closer, it seemed to show a trend regarding the hit detection. It will cause frustration during your playthrough. Let's also talk about checkpoints. This is one of the strangest games I've seen in terms of checkpoints incorporated into the level. You go from having a checkpoint after one small hazard that seemed easy to get by, to having a checkpoint after several more difficult obstacles to conquer. That translated to frustration because of it, as you'd wondered why there were no checkpoint around for a task you repeatedly failed at. I'm not exactly sure what the level designer in this aspect was thinking, because it was so wildly inconsistent it probably caused the biggest issue of the entire game. It caused me to walk away from the game several times, which is not what I think the developer was going for. I think my main problem was that inconsistency. Hard platformers are fine, but when you go from an easy checkpoint after one hazard to one that has 5 hard hazards in a row, it makes you wonder why a checkpoint wasn't put in the middle of that sequence. Those who get easily frustrated may need to be advised on playing this game. But I do want to give the game this. there's enough variety here in terms of ways to get through a level. If you mastered timing of double jumps or the use of powers, the right way of getting through the level opened up, as you were able to bypass several hazards with no problems. This was definitely enjoyable, as I love when games open up like this, as you feel like you really mastered something, or gotten away with something, when you get through a section that you probably weren't supposed to like the way you did. There's also some replayability on levels. You get 3 goals to complete a level. First is to collect all the orbs in the level, which is usually doable due to the fact that dying doesn't take an orb away. Second is the time aspect. Beat the level in a certain amount of time. Again, doable if you avoid the orbs, for example. Third is limiting your deaths, and usually was the hardest one to get. I didn't bother with this portion due to wanting to get further and further in the levels for my first impressions, but take note of that, there is some replayability here. Music also isn't exactly a strong suit of the game either. It does an alright job at times to fit the nature of the game, but sometimes it plays way too much on the text to describe the nature of the level, and makes the music fit appropriately. Now part of this is the visuals and the fact that the simple and minimalistic style is a little bit different, and it's hard to have the music match that, but not to say the music was bad either, it just doesn't stand out for me in any way. And note the story. While the game does a decent job of setup at the start of how Oscura, the apprentice, destroys the Aurora Stone and plunging the whole world into darkness, and why his hand is on fire all the time, but after that initial go around, the game rarely sprinkles story elements into the game, or at least notable ones. Which is a shame. It seems like they could have really done a bit more with this element here, but it felt like they fell to the wayside for a focus on gameplay. Which all in all was fine for me, but for some it will really disappoint them in the end, because apparently this is also a series that I'm unaware of. All in all, for those who like the platforming genre, there may be enough here to pick up Oscura Lost Light, as it does do several things right. It's a game that really falls into a category that will exclude people who get frustrated by games easily and expect perfection and flawless gameplay, as the warts on this game will stand out for those people, and will cause frustration. And while the game could feel samey at times despite the changes in level design, the base gameplay and art style make up for a game that is definitely worth a look, especially for platformer fans out there. Now, it's not on the top of this genre by any stretch of the word, but it is solid in many aspects, and you will get some enjoyment out of it.